I'm Larry Levin of the Jewish Light, and we're here tonight with noted Middle East expert and St. Louis native David Makovsky. David, welcome and thanks.
It's always good to be back home.
With you giving a talk and answering a question at the JCC for our Can We Talk series, let's have a different focus here and talk a little about the journalism and news business issues surrounding Iran and the Middle East. So you're a world-class expert with substantial knowledge and history on Iran, but with there being so much info out there, so many opinions out there, it can get hard for the man or woman on the street to sift through the information. And as the issue gets louder, the noise gets louder. How does one really develop a truly educated and informed personal perspective?
It's very hard. I mean, in our think tank in Washington, we have the ability to always interact with government, and that's crucial for us in doing our job at the Washington Institute. People can always look at our website. We always also are in touch with Israeli government, European governments, other governments that are really very much zoomed, like a focus like a laser on Iran. So I would hope that people look at a multiplicity of sources, and hopefully they'll get a broad range of ideas, and they'll get a sense of what's real or not. But they're welcome to look at our website, WashingtonInstitute.org, and I realize it's hard out there and to really know what's what. But I think there are credible newspapers. I don't always agree with everything written, in all of them. I'm not here to endorse any paper, but if you look at the Washington Post, all this stuff is online. Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, New York Times, I'd say Haaretz, Jerusalem Post. There's a new one. A friend of mine, David Horowitz, was the editor, also like me, of the Jerusalem Post, called The Times of Israel. Yep. I think if you look at them, you look at our website, you look at those 7 sites, you'll get a sense of where the center of gravity is on a given issue. And
even though much is available on the web beyond those, most Americans don't tend to read media perspectives beyond those available in American and Israeli publications. Yeah. So I was curious, how does the Iran situation look, for instance, when you start seeing it through the lens of other nations' news outlets?
Well, it's a good question. I mean, I usually, when I interact with other countries, I interact with their diplomats and their people who are there, Iran watchers. They come to our office, so I feel very fortunate in that regard. For a person who's sitting here, that's very hard to do. Like I said, I think if you hit those 7, you'll get a wide enough perspective that you'll get a sense of the gist and of the zone.
We saw Twitter and Facebook play a huge role in Arab Spring. Will we see that similar phenomenon over time in Iran, or did the internal circumstances really make it a totally different ballgame?
It's harder. We hear that Iran wants to sharpen their grip on censorship. This is a different sort of a thing than the Arab Spring, which was by definition, a public
groundswell,
an outpouring. So to get your finger on that pulse, having the social media was crucial. Here we're dealing with a topic that is often more esoteric, which is the pace of a nuclear program that the average guy in Iran does not know either. And if they did, you'd be a little suspect. So I tend to think that social media will be useful if there is like a political upheaval, like you saw in 2009. Then social media was key. But if we're talking about really tracking the nuclear program of Iran, then I wouldn't look to social media. But what does happen is that people will read an article they like, and then it gets passed around that way.
Journalists have always been aware of the risks associated with coverage, and you're certainly among those who have taken those risks. But the conventional paradigms associated with journalistic safety seem to be eroding even further. Do you share that view? And if so, how do you think it's going to affect coverage?
Well, look, in Syria is where you're seeing it. I mean, it seems that Marie Colvin, who I met at the Sunday Times of London, and Anthony Shadid, who I was on an NPR program with once, who tragically died covering Syria. There you're seeing, it seems to me, a regime that is deliberately targeting journalists because they don't want the word to get out. But life has changed since Hafez al-Assad, killed 20,000 people in Hama and then paved it over as a parking lot. In this era of YouTube and the internet, flip phones, it's very hard for a regime to commit a genocide, basically, in silence. So they're going to try to do what they can, and you're in awe of the bravery of these journalists who want to be bear witness to the world. Mm-hmm. But I just think that in the end, Syria will not succeed. There's too many people watching. Every person with a flip phone today is a potential journalist.
Absolutely.
who is then sending this stuff to Beirut, and the stuff is getting uploaded, and it's seen for the world. So, I mean, as much as the Syrians will try, I don't believe they'll be successful.
Given your comment and the fact that there are so many citizen journalists out there now, right, what do you like about American Jewish coverage of the Middle East from true journalistic publications? What do you think they're doing well? What aren't they doing well? Are there elements missing, you think, that really need to be more pronounced?
It's a very hard job, and I salute people like yourselves and someone I consider a mentor, Bob Cohn, who really gave me my first job in journalism and really got me from the age of 11 interested in these issues. So I salute people who are really engaged and professionally given their lives to trying to be a link, really, in a very meaningful way for American Jews who, wouldn't know anything about Israel. And don't forget, when I was growing up, we didn't have the internet, we didn't have any of this. So basically what we knew from newspapers. Today, because things are online, like I said, you have more choice. But I still think that there's a mission of the American Jewish community to try to really be that link, to be a key link. Now they don't have to be the exclusive link because there are more ways of connecting in ways that they didn't used to be. But, even though the data is known, it's still important to interpret that data. And that's why I think Jewish papers will always be around, because obviously, all the local news in terms of the Jewish community, they're indispensable. And in terms of Israel, they're able to put it through maybe refracted through a prism that you won't read in the Post-Dispatch or the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal. So they will be able to focus on the more of the kind of the Jewish dimension issues rather than just the meat and potato news things that people will get their news from otherwhere. So the connection of Jews in Israel, the Jews in the diaspora, that link is going to be strengthened by Jewish publications who are really committed to that sense of peoplehood in a way that's not what you're reading your general newspaper for. You're not reading the Post-Dispatch for that. You're not reading the Washington Post for that. So to the extent that they focus a lot on these peoplehood issues, and it might be the status of the Jews how are the Jews of Ethiopia doing today, or how is birthright having an impact on people's identity. All these Jewish identity and Jewish peoplehood issues, you're not going to get that from a general publication.
That's right, and people talk about St. Louis being a fairly small American Jewish population, but the truth of the matter is this is a population that's the size of the Hungarian or South African Jewish population. Oh, yeah. So I mean, any Jewish publication, that would be an important consideration.
Yeah, I think all the Jews of England altogether is like 250,000 people. I mean, so St. Louis is already like a quarter of that.
Yeah.
But so St. Louis should be very proud. I mean, it has also a tradition of these connections. A lot of its leaders were people who were engaged. But I think today, to the extent that you bring it alive for a newer generation that doesn't remember the Holocaust, even the '67 war, and some of them, some of them, they're college students out there, they don't remember the handshake of the White House in the '90s.
Exactly.
So there's an important element of institutional memory that the Jewish community can pass on that people are just not going to get from a general interest publication.
Exactly.
So, and that's apart from its core mission, which is to create a sense of identity among local Jews about the gamut of activities locally, which is at the core. But to the extent that it broadens that and makes it, maybe with all the social media, Twitter, Facebook, makes these issues come alive. To young people who don't even remember any of this, they're able to do things and reach people in ways that others can't, because no one knows the young people locally than the people of a local publication. There's no way there's going to be ever a national Jewish publication that could do it better
on local St. Louis news.
Than on that. So, it's a bit like, I think of it a bit like, maybe I compare everything to the St. Louis Cardinals, but you see, the link of an enterprise that has a strong tradition, has a sense of self-worth and a belief that they're part of a longer chain. I think that St. Louis Jewish community I grew up in always had that sense, and I think that's and it's the vitality of a local publication that convey that sense of tradition, but always innovate and make it new and relevant to a younger generation. Well, there's no replacing that. I mean, that's key in building those sense of links and those sense of roots. No one could beat that.
David, thank you so much.
Delighted.
On behalf of our producer, Aggie Gallagher, on behalf of Bob Cohn, our editor-in-chief emeritus, who suddenly lost his voice today, but is feeling better, we might add. On behalf of the entire Light crew, we want to thank you for being here and visiting with David.
If I could also just wish your viewers Chag Sameach, Passover coming.
Chag Sameach to you
and
as
wish
well.
the Cardinals a very strong season as defending world champions.
Wow. And you should know David is planning to be back October 15th at the Brodsky Library, so hopefully we'll be in the playoffs by then.
I hope so. I already have missed I've been here for the season and a homestand, so at least hopefully I can get a playoff game when I come back.